DJ Teach on Futures Public Radio.
So it's been a long time since I've had a go at this radio show or podcast. We've had a hiatus for the winter break. And for those of you who might be listening, there is a premise to the show, and I'll remind you one more time of what that premise is, that one of our colleagues is cast away to a desert island, and he or she has to choose to keep them company 4 songs, a favourite book, and they're allowed to take with them a luxury item. And I've forgotten on occasions to also insist that they boil it down from those 4 songs to one that they would listen to for eternity, because there's no escape from this desert island, just in case you're wondering. And this evening's guest is the Renaissance man himself, Mr. Steve Northcott. Our first 3 guests were Breen, Bridget and Brian, and it's somewhat unusual not to have a br as a guest. So
this will be the first of many disappointments for you.
I'm glad you said it, because that indeed was my next line. But it's nice to have you here. You were quick to sign up as a volunteer, and we had a few near misses, but thank you for joining me, Steve.
Happy to be here.
Afternoon. So I've established, since I've known you, Steve, which has been a few months, I've known of you for quite some time.
That'll be a question I have for you later.
Through FBI background searches and,
fair.
And shared former
Absolutely
colleagues,
fair.
One of whom is Jeff Ballard, whose name was bound to crop up.
A legendary fellow and hopefully future champion.
Legend in his own lunchtime, Jeff. I've established that you are, in fact, Canadian. How do you plead?
Guilty as charged,
Guilty
for
as
sure.
charged,
But,
right.
you know, as much of a Canadian as many of the people that you will meet in the world that we live, right? I haven't lived there for 15, 16 years. And now it's been the majority of my adult life, my formative years, if you will.
Yeah. But as we proceed, it's important that we understand again that we acknowledge the same Queen.
If you say so, sir. Absolutely.
Acknowledge.
She's still alive, is she? Bless her heart. I guess she's holding on until Harry gets married. Is that right?
She watched the State of the Union last night. She might have passed away, but that's another topic which we'll leave alone.
Bless her. My mom loves the Queen and all things royal.
With respect, Steve. Therefore, I love your mum.
Yeah.
In the nicest possible sense. So, Steve,
she'll be one of the people listening to get this up to 34 views tomorrow. Just so you know, she's pretty excited. She doesn't even know what's happening, but she'll be the first to listen to it for sure.
First name?
Patricia.
Hello, Patricia.
Pat.
From Patrick. Nice to get to know you across the airwaves. So you were born near Toronto, or not? Have I got that completely wrong?
I was born near Toronto in a town called
right?
Burlington, which is about 30, 40 minutes, even closer really to Toronto. But I moved to Woodstock very young.
What was the cause of that move? What took you to Woodstock? It sounds quite romantic. It probably isn't.
It's the entertainment mecca of southwestern Ontario.
Right.
You know, my parents being young swingers just wanted to roll into Woodstock. No, my dad's work. At the time he worked for the company. I believe it's called International Harvester, which sells the big 18 rigs, like the big massive trucks you see on the road.
Tempted to go into that business yourself?
Myself?
Yeah.
No, sir.
No, not at all.
I'm no salesman, contrary to what people might believe.
I think you could prove yourself wrong. And so, how was early childhood over in Woodstock? Fond memories?
It is your basic childhood of the 80s, right, where the doors were unlocked and the streets were yours.
Yeah,
you know, there wasn't
family valuables were stolen behind your back.
Yeah, there wasn't many valuables back in the day, but you had the big farmland out back. You could run. There's streams and that sort of thing. A lot of hockey, a lot of friends.
Brothers and sisters.
I have an older sister.
Right.
Caroline.
Okay, good. And then school was how for you? Fun?
Well, I'm a teacher. You know,
school
for me was. Yeah, that was okay. I went through ups and downs of wanting to be there and not wanting to be there. I never found school particularly challenging, from that side of things.
Yeah.
So, it didn't pain me to go, but when I see the kind of educational environment that I'm now currently teaching in and my daughter gets to enjoy, it definitely makes me realize, I might have missed out on a few things.
What might have been, right?
What might have been, yeah.
Although, of course, it's a great privilege to be able to give it to your children.
Well, when you're a middle school art teacher, you've reached the pinnacle. So, I got to where I needed to go.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. And so when we do this show, we talk about the importance of music in your life and mine, in fact. Although you're an active musician, I'm an envious musician. But interestingly enough, the first song that we'll talk about in a little while, you reference it as being important in middle school. Most of the guests so far have spoken about the first sort of jumping into music in the high school time. But when did music first come into your life, and how and why? And
Well, I was thinking about that today because I figured that would be a question you would ask based upon the other podcast. I was one of the other 45 podcast listeners to the other ones.
All right.
Some of the earliest memories I have of music are the cassette player in the car and my dad's limited record collection at the time. So there was definitely memories of Kenny Rogers, and Dolly Parton. The old school country, which you grab onto. The production is fantastic. The stories are rich and very vivid. My dad loves Johnny Cash, but he often sung it more than he played it.
Right.
And for those of you who've had the pleasure of hearing my dad sing, that's not a good thing.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So he'll be the first to admit it, though.
Yeah.
But bless his heart, he loves to sing, which is important.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why myself is not a gifted singer. I have no problem punishing people who, go to the bars to hear me sing. So country was kind of the first things I remember about music, and then it's about, as you're growing up, people that you admire, right, and people you look up to, and people you know. And one of the early music influences in my life was my cousin Mark, who he loved the heavy metal. He loved the hair bands of the '80s, and so the Motley Crue, the Def Leppard.
I was just talking about them today at lunch with the esteemed Garrick Monroe.
Oh, there you go.
He was a fan, and we reflected on the rock and roll legend of the one-armed drummer. It doesn't get much better than that.
No, it doesn't. Absolutely not. And I remember when he introduced me to him, or to the bands like that, Motley Crue and what have you, I was fascinated by it, just because the world that they seemed to inhabit was so far off than the world that I lived. Right?
Yeah.
Everything from the fashion, the wardrobe, and the hair, and dudes wearing makeup, and the instruments that they played, and how they played it. That's a different. That might as well have been outer space. When you're a 10-year-old kid in grade 4.
Similar to me watching punk, I think.
I'm sorry?
Similar to me watching punk evolve.
Sure. And so, I was drawn to it. And of course, back then, tame by today's standards, but, some of the things that they'd think about or sing about, a little taboo, for a 10, 11, 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, here's an opportunity for me to hear men in leather and makeup talk about girls.
Dreams come true, isn't
Yeah,
it?
dreams come true. So I got into that for a little bit, and then it was right around middle school where, maybe a little younger middle school, where it was the first time I listened to rap and hip-hop, and I was introduced to that. And that sort of set aside my first time with music where I found something, right, I liked. It wasn't just the radio giving me what they thought I needed to hear. It wasn't my cousin's favorite band. It was, what's this? I want to hear this more.
So why don't you go ahead, therefore, and tell the listener, your mother, what your first song is and why?
All right. So the first song, the first song I have up here is James Brown. Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. And the first time I saw James Brown was when I sat down to watch Rocky IV. And so I watched Rocky IV on VHS, and it was right before the Apollo Creed fight, right, where he's fighting the Russian. And before the fight, James Brown comes on and puts on this ridiculous show with costumes and the dancers. And when you put on James Brown, it almost doesn't even matter which James Brown song you pick, but the face you make when you hear the first note in every James Brown song is like, I call it the sting face, right? It's the, what is this? It brings everything.
I wish you could see what I'm saying.
Just,
right now.
It's often horns, right? Like,
there you go.
And then it just kind of drops into.
By the way, there is no actual horn in the room.
No, there is no horn.
Mouth horn.
Right. So when I saw James Brown in Rocky IV, I've always sort of liked James Brown from there as the epitome showman. In fact, I always, from the hair metal bands to seeing James Brown, you always had this idea that that's how performers had to be.
Yeah.
Right. That's in order for you to be a musician, and you're seeing people like Elton John and the Beatles with their elaborate costumes, as they evolved through their different stages. You started to realize, how could you possibly even be a musician when this is sort of the standard of what you had to do and what you had to be. You needed to have 30 girls on stage dancing. Yeah. You needed to have a 14-piece band. Like, that was, how can you be a musician when you have to have all this working for you? Yeah. Nowadays, of course, you can just have 3 guys in a garage, and I guess you always could. But so that's why I really dug James Brown.
Cool. Well, let's listen to Papa's Got a Brand New Bag.
Papa's. So this, get your sting face ready, because this is.
I'll never leave home without it.
See
So that was Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, James Brown, Steve Northcott's first choice for being sent to the desert island.
Yeah, if I'm on an island and I'm bored out of my mind, and you're going to have good days and bad days, but if you're having a bad day, just pop on a little.
Well, I mean, just to make things a little bit brighter for you, just to
For
confirm
sure,
that
yeah.
the first three guests have passed away on the desert island, so you won't be bothered by Breen and Bridget and Brian.
I'm all by myself. I can make that stink face all I want.
Skeletons in the sand.
Oh, wow.
Literally and metaphorically on this desert island. So high school next, of course, I would imagine.
The wonder years.
Logic
Sure.
Suggests. Where was high school and what were you up to? What were your interests?
High school for me was St. Mary's High School in Woodstock, Ontario. At the time, tiny, Patrick. We're talking.
You or the school?
The school.
Right.
School. No, I had both phases in high school. You know, started off a little husky.
Right.
And then, of course, hit the spurt
Right,
towards the
right.
end. See, my old man owned, after the gig selling trucks that he did,
Yeah.
he decided to run a couple Tim Horton donut shops.
Did he?
You see, so
Dangerous.
when you're 10 years old and you had access to soup and muffins and donuts, you take advantage of that. And for sure,
So, I mean, dudes with makeup and leather to donuts and... You could live in the dream, wouldn't you?
colorful
This
life.
is the Canadian dream.
Live in the dream.
Promise to its
Yeah,
people.
as my friend Scott, a good friend of mine back home, as he will consistently remind me, my whole platform for grade 8 student council elections for class president was a platform on donuts.
Did you win?
And I certainly won,
course you did.
for sure, for sure. And every single middle school kid, they got all the donuts they needed every
That's good.
Friday, for sure. We raised a lot of money for, of course, important
Yes, and you
needs.
contributed hugely to regional obesity,
That's right.
from which the country is probably still struggling.
Without a
Thanks
doubt.
for that.
Without a doubt, you know. And so, no, the school was small, 400 people, and that's grade 9
Yep.
all the way up through what they had, something called OAC at the time, Ontario Academic Credits. I guess you can kind of loosely relate it to the IB program, if you will. It's
Yeah.
like a preparatory year for university in Ontario. I played.
Strong academically?
I'm sorry?
Strong academically?
Myself? I was the sort of person who, because I never felt really challenged in schools when I was young,
Yeah.
I got bored
Yeah.
really quickly with school. And there weren't a lot of teachers when I was in high school who were of the inspirational sort. I could
Yeah.
probably name 2. And from there, when I got to high school, I sort of relegated to okay, I need an A average to get to university. Well, that's what I'll get.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. There was not any academic motivation for me personally to go beyond. I enjoyed playing hockey. I enjoyed my friends that I was with. I knew what I needed to do, or more specifically, what my parents, for sure wanted me to move forward with university. And I academically did what I needed to do to get there,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And what about music? Were you playing anything at the time, learning anything?
I wasn't, no, I worked a ton. I've been working since probably 11 years old, 10 years old. I've always had a job. So even when I was in high school, if I wasn't...
What were you doing in high school then? What kind of work were you doing?
So,
Sweeping chimneys. I got sort of-
grade 9, I would have started with my dad's
Okay.
Tim Hortons, the donut
Yeah.
shop. But then when he sold those, I did a ton of things, my man. I owned my own sports card collectible store, which I ran for 2 years. And then once the store went down, I took my goods and went to like trade and collectible shows around Ontario. My mother would drive me around. I worked as a stock boy for department stores. I was a short order cook at a golf course. I worked at Walmart. You name it, I've done
one
it.
step ahead.
But always had a job, and so all through high school I would work 3-4 days a week, and then I would always work on weekends. And so if I had football practice or hockey practice, hockey was always morning, football was always afternoon. But I would always have to do the practice and
Yeah.
then go to work.
Yeah.
And so that was my life in high school. It was busy but fun.
Yeah, good.
It allowed me to afford things to do, like what I wanted to do, and go on trips and
And
things of that nature.
is there a song on your list this evening that reminds you of high school or is related to high school at all that you'll
No, not-
take with you on the island?
I wouldn't say there's any song on my list that reminds me of high school. Actually, I didn't go that route with it. The one we're gonna play next, the Tom Waits song, I got introduced to Tom Waits when I bought a punk compilation album of bands that I was listening to at the time, later years of high school, early years of university. Bands like NoFX and Pennywise and punk rock bands of the time. And Epitaph released a compilation of punk songs from their label. It was a California-based punk label called Punkorama, right? And at the time, Tom Waits had just been signed to Epitaph, which was an odd move all around, because I guess you can classify Tom Waits as punk, but not by its traditional
No.
definition, right? And so I got the
On
album.
margins of, I would say.
I'm sorry?
On the margins of punk.
Yeah, like the punk notion that I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to make any kind of sounds I want. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. You know, it's one way you would describe Tom Waits and his music. So when I got the album, I hadn't even heard of Tom Waits. In fact, I didn't even know. I just glossed over his name on the liner notes of all the different bands, and it was one of the later songs on the disc. And I remember getting to it, thinking, "What is this?" Like my first impression was that it was horrible. Like it was one of the worst. How is this even music?
I can imagine many people have first reaction to Tom
I think
Waits.
so.
Some end up accessing him and loving it.
Yeah, for sure.
Some shy away, but that has that effect, I think.
Well, you have to find your entry song for him, which I think is huge. Even like an entrance album, you know, from beginning to end, and every.
Which for me was Rain Dogs as we.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a fantastic album.
Yeah.
Starfish Trombones was good.
Yeah.
Mine was Small Change. That was the album that got me into Tom Waits. But it was the Punkorama compilation that introduced me to his name. I ignored him. You know, I went along my little punk path that I was going to do that I enjoyed. But it wasn't until the second year of university where I was in Amsterdam on a Europe trip, and I just had, you know, some music going, and a Tom Waits song came on, or a Tom Waits album came on, and it hooked me, and I listened to that album every day.
Right.
While I was on my trip, like
Right,
just from beginning to
let's
end.
go ahead and listen to your second choice tonight then, Tom Waits.
The reason why I picked this one,
Step Right Up. Go
Step
ahead,
Right
Tex,
Up. Yeah, the reason why I picked it though specifically as the Tom Waits song was because I'm associating everything with life on the island.
Yeah.
Right. And as a musician, it's almost impossible to choose a Tom Waits song to cover.
Yeah.
You know, how are you going to do it? You're going to do it melodically the same? Are you going to try to sound like him? No, you can't do that. But this song I just find so full of words. Right, that if this is one of the only songs that I have to listen to, well, eventually I'll learn them all.
Yeah.
Right, but it just goes in off every direction. He's just scatting, right? He's just scatting and barking, you know, these carnival words,
Which is what
right?
you'll be doing a lot of as you go insane on the island.
Exactly.
You'll be barking and scatting in that order. Let's go ahead and listen to
This is Step Right Up.
Step Right Up.
Yeah.
Step right up, step right up, step right up. Everyone's a winner, bargains galore. That's right, you too can be the proud owner. The quality goes in before the name goes on. 1/10 of a dollar, 1/10 of a dollar. We got service after the sale. How about perfume? We got perfume. How about an engagement ring? Some for the little lady, some for the little lady, some for the little lady. $3-4. We got a year-end clearance. We got our white sale and a smoke-damaged furniture. You can drive it away today. Act now, and receive is our gift. Our gift to you. They come in all colors. One size fits all. No muss, no fuss, no spills. You tired of kitchen drudgery? Everything must go. Going out of business, going out of business, going out of business. 50% off original retail price. Skip the middleman. Don't settle for less. How do we do it? How do we do it? Volume, turn up the volume. Well, you heard it advertised. Don't hesitate. Don't be caught with your drawers down. Don't be caught with your drawers down. You can step right up. Step right up. That's right, it fillets and chops, dice and slices, never stops. Lasts a lifetime, mows your lawn. And it mows your lawn and it picks up the kids from school. It gets rid of unwanted facial hair. It gets rid of embarrassing age spots. It delivers a pizza. And it lengthens, and it strengthens, and it finds that slipper that's been at large under the chaise lounge for several weeks. And it plays a mean rhythm master. It makes excuses for unwanted lipstick on your collar. And it's only $1. Step right up. It's only $1. Step right up. Cause it forges your signature. Not completely satisfied. Mail back unused portion of product for complete refund of price of purchase. Step right up. Please allow 30 days for delivery. Don't be fooled by cheap imitations. You can live in it, laughing it, loving it, swimming it, sleeping it, living it, swimming it, laughing it, loving it. Remove embarrassing stains from contour sheets. That's right. And it entertains visiting relatives. It turns a sandwich into a banquet. Tired of being the life of the party? Change your shorts, change your life, change your life. Change into a 9-year-old Hindu boy. Get rid of your wife. And it walks your dog. And it doubles on sacks. Doubles on sacks. You can jump back jacks. gets rid of your gambling debts. It quits smoking. It's a friend, it's a companion, it's the only product you will ever need. Follow these easy assembly instructions, it never needs ironing. Well, it takes weights off hips, bust, thighs, chin, midriff, gives you dandruff, and it finds you a job. It is a job. And it strips the phone company free, takes inter-rial exchange. And it gives you denture breath. And you know it's a friend, and it's a companion, and it gets rid of your traveler's checks. It's new, it's improved, it's old-fashioned. Well, it takes care of business, never needs binding, never needs binding, never needs binding. Gets rid of blackheads, heartbreak, and psoriasis. Christ, you don't know the meaning of heartbreak, buddy. Come on, come on. Come on, come on. Because it's effective, it's defective. It creates household odors, it disinfects, it sanitizes for your protection. It gives you an erection, it wins the election. Why put up with painful coins any longer? It's a redeemable coupon, no obligation, no salesman will visit your home. We got a jackpot, jackpot, jackpot. Prizes, prizes, prizes. All work guaranteed. How do we do it? 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 We need your business. We're going out of business. We'll give you the business. Get on the business end of our going out of business sale. Receive our free brochure. Free brochure. Read the easy to follow assembly instructions. Batteries not included. Send before midnight tomorrow. Terms available. Step right up. Step right up. Step right up. You got it, buddy. A large print giveth and a small print taketh away. Step right up. You can step right up. You can step right up. Come on, step right up. Get away from me, kid. You are. Step right up. Step right up. Step right up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on. Step right up. You can step right up. Come on, step right up. Come on, step right up.
So that's Tom Waits and Step Right Up, and that's Steve Northcott's second choice this evening. Or it could be this morning, depending on when you listen to this. I guess most people listen to it 3 or 4 times
The beauty,
a day.
yeah, for sure. The
That's
beauty of
joy
podcasts.
Podcasting.
That's the only reason why your view count hasn't gone up, because if you listen to it or the same IP address, it doesn't increase your count. So the
Right.
50 or 55 people who are listening, they're listening 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah.
But that's the only reason why the counts are going up.
I appreciate your attempt to make me feel a little bit better about my sad existence. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It means a lot. So high school, off to the University of Guelph, where I understand you didn't jump straight into teaching. You went down another path. Is that right?
Yeah. Like I said, my high school experience wasn't a great one, and there wasn't a tremendous amount of guidance in terms of...
Just can you move on? Right, get over it.
Get over it, yeah.
Good
You're
to see.
right. I got to let that go.
Unless you will. A little bit of therapy, but that costs a bit more.
So I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life, to be perfectly honest with you. And it doesn't really help when people say you can do anything, right? That's not
essentially not true either.
yeah,
Really.
Because my father has a very strong entrepreneurial spirit, and I had that time in my high school where I was had that sports card collectible store and what have you, and math was something that always came really easy to me.
Really?
Yeah, so should we pause that out?
Just in case you're wondering what's going on, the buses are leaving in 5 minutes.
If you're taking the bus home,
You're taking the bus home.
This is the last call.
I was wondering
This is
when
the
you were
last
going to overdub that and put your voice on there. I think it's time. I think it's time to change the voice.
It's time to have a sort of maybe Hugh Grant or something like that.
In your best Hugh Grant.
Yes.
So I just thought I would follow in that entrepreneurial spirit, go into business, and kind of see where it went. When I was doing the sports cards thing, the excitement about that was getting something of value and selling it for higher value.
Yeah.
But every person I met in that sports card community, every person older than me, I was one of the youngest people
Yeah.
at these conventions I would go to. Most of them were 40, 45. And as a young person, you are motivated by money because you don't have any of it, right? So I would see these adults and I'd be like, okay, well, I don't necessarily think I want to be you at 41 doing the same thing I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I can't spend my life with sports collectibles. So I'm like, well, what's the adult version? Securities, right? Thinking about stocks or what have you. And so that's what I studied in university. I studied economics and business. And my first job out of school was doing portfolio management for an institutional investment firm called State Street.
Goodness me.
It was horrible. It was,
Why was it
the
horrible?
most
It sounds-
soul-sucking. Well, like.
Tell us how you really feel.
It's not like what's that good Trading Places, Eddie Murphy. It's not it's not that by any means. But what happens essentially is you're managing this portfolio. So whether it be a company or corporation's health plan, or their retirement plan, which is a portfolio of 75 to 150 stocks, and it's my job to execute the balance of them every day, whether it be buying them or selling them, and that's it.
Right.
And it's all done on a computer,
Yeah.
and the client was in Orlando. So
yeah.
I went from living a pretty free life
It doesn't play to
to
your
all
strengths, does it?
no, it doesn't. All of a sudden they take you and I had a beautiful spot on the 37th floor of the Bank of Montreal building in downtown Toronto on Bay Street. Beautiful window overlooking Lake Ontario, but my back was to it the whole time. You see, and I just sat at a desk and.
Well, maybe it's too late for you to suggest that you could have simply moved the desk.
I could have, but no, I did have a prime spot, so I had to keep it, but I couldn't shift it around
Right.
the other way.
Sorry, I mean, it's not very helpful now.
No, it's really not.
If only I'd been there at the time.
When I quit 5 months later, I lasted 5 months in that job. When I quit 5 months later, one of the management people actually sat in like the cubicle next to me, and he told me, he goes, I just wanted to tell you something. On your first day here, I overheard you on the phone talking to somebody, because we couldn't text back then. There was no cell phones. You had to call people, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, I overheard you call someone and tell them that that day was the worst day of your life. That was the first day of my job, of what I studied for and spent $50,000 to prepare myself on and blah, blah, blah. And so...
This is turning more and more into a therapy session.
Yeah,
And
for
I'm
sure.
okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know if I must have told that story to someone.
So after that miserable experience, you did what?
Well, I needed a job. Like, I wasn't in a place where I could just quit a job
Yeah.
and live in Toronto with no money. I had a massive debt from school, like a lot of people do, right? So it's not like I could just jump around. I just needed something less punishing, with my time in mind, and at least had some direction. So at the time, I got a job with the government, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, working in their finance branch.
I'm on the verge of laughing at this.
Yeah.
But
What was even more horrible about this job?
Absolutely miserable.
This is probably not entertaining to anybody who's listening, because they don't really know who I am
It's okay.
now.
No
Like
one's listening.
Steve Northcott, 2018.
No one's listening.
It's comedic.
Yeah.
That I was in that
It's
situation.
180.
And that was even worse because they put you in an office. So now you just got four walls and a door that I just kept
Goodness
pulling.
me,
And I did nothing for the greater good of the Ontario taxpayer. Nothing. Not a single,
statement.
not a single thing.
I'm glad they're not listening.
Well, I'm sure they are, but I wasn't the only one milking Ontario dollars and not doing
down.
anything good for the government, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, so
And then I went to teachers'
You
college.
went to teachers' college, which was the saving of you, moving into.
Not at the time. The saving of me didn't happen until
it sounds
I.
better if you say yes.
Yeah, just say yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Would you? No,
Yes,
not
sir.
Well, yeah.
In hindsight, it was the best decision I ever made,
Uh-huh.
without a shadow of a doubt. But when I went to teachers' college, the idea of me living overseas, that wasn't even a seed.
Yeah.
I didn't even know this world
What was
existed.
your specialty at teachers' college? What was your
My specialty at teachers' college was, I said,
focus?
primary, junior,
Mm-hmm.
junior intermediate, like a general. It was, I believe so. My first teaching placement was kindergarten classroom.
Right.
Yeah, I learned all I needed to know in those 3 weeks.
Yeah. There's an image.
It's when I started drinking coffee too,
Yeah.
right around that
At
time.
the very least. And that's just the beginning of it. And then, so you must have got a teaching job after that, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I got
Somewhere
hired
exotic.
before I was even finished teachers college. I got a job
Yeah,
in
where was that?
Toronto.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
What kind of school?
It was a K-8 school, inner city. I worked for a split grade 6-7 class, 20 grade 6s, 15 grade 7s. I taught every subject.
How many kids in the class?
35.
That gives me an idea. I'll
35.
make
It was crowd management
Yeah.
101. That's all it was. And I was 24,
Yikes.
maybe. And I lived on energy. That's it. Like I got through on energy.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That probably sounds like a very familiar story to anyone who is listening, in fact.
For sure, especially for
teacher training
teachers from
college.
back home and that sort of thing.
All right,
But-
so I have to, get to the point because you're known as being a musician and passionate musician, and as yet, it hasn't really featured in the story in terms of your own personal participation as a musician. But you moved from Toronto. Your first jump overseas, I think, was to Asia and to Singapore. Is that have I got that timeline right?
That's right. Yeah, Toronto to Singapore, 2003.
Okay, and then were you at that point, beginning to play, learning to play, or
I was like
crop up
a
in your life?
bedroom musician in Canada,
Right.
right? Just open chords and that sort of thing. And at that point, I don't think I've ever played a song and sung it from beginning to end. But I've always been very fortunate that no matter where I lived, when I started to play the guitar, I was always friends with somebody or had somebody around me who was very generous
Yeah.
and was always a better musician than me.
Right.
The way I look at it is if I'm going to be in a band, I need to be the worst musician in that band.
I've heard that before from people in bands, actually.
Yeah, if I'm the worst person in that band, the band's going to do all right. If I'm the best person in that band's not going to do very well.
Right. Yeah.
That's my philosophy towards it.
But it's similar to playing sports, isn't it? When you play with someone who's better than you, you play up.
Exactly, and you get better faster.
Yeah.
And it teaches
Or
you a
speaking
lot about
language,
patience.
for example. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, in Singapore there was a really good friend of mine by the name of Mark Race. So maybe I'll email him. There'll be a second listener for us, which is good. And he was always patient with me. Whenever we'd go to the beach, we'd bring guitars. Holidays, we'd bring guitars. And at one point, he said to me, he's like, "I think it's time for us to start a band." He was already in a band,
Right.
but he said, "I think it's time for us to start a band
You started a band
and
in
go
Singapore.
play."
That's great.
Yeah,
And what were you playing guitar? At
I was
the time?
playing guitar, and I wasn't singing at the time. I was
Right.
just trying my hardest to get through the 8 songs that we had at the time to play.
And you joined a band in Singapore, your first band,
Yeah.
playing guitar with Mark.
With Mark and a
What was
few
the
other
name of the
friends. Tailor-made suits.
Nice.
Biggest show we ever played was the Canada Day celebration
Right.
in Singapore to a festival crowd.
Just
Of
makes-
about
There's so many things I want to say at this point.
I would say there was in the hundreds of people there, but they were keeping themselves occupied
They were drunk. is
with
what you're saying.
and hot dogs were there. People were eating barbecue and stuff. A lot of children were really into our set.
Cover set, I imagine, right?
It was
original
all
songs, or-
Canadian. We did a lot of Canadian songs.
Did you
The,
really?
the highlight was probably Barrett's Privateers.
I have no idea what that is.
Stan Rogers.
Okay.
We did a cappella too, 5-part harmonies,
Really?
which was
Any Neil Young?
didn't do any. Maybe we did. I don't even remember at this point. It's possible.
Yeah.
Some tragically
Limited
hip.
knowledge of Canadian music, I'm afraid. Good. So you joined Tailor-Made Suits, and any songs at that time? Because often we've heard from the guests so far, and certainly in my life, when you move to a new environment, there's an artist or a song even that you sort of latch onto, or reminds you of at least. Anything from your list this evening that sort of reminds you of Singapore?
Well, the tailor-made suit was a kind of a leaping board to Malaysia. I lasted a very short time in Singapore.
Right.
It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Malaysia, and my first night there, I meet this fella named Eric, and he asked me if music came up, and he goes, "Do you ever play music?" I'm like, "Oh, I was in a band in Singapore." And he goes, "Well, what's the music scene like there?" And I'm being self-deprecating. I'm like, "Well, if I'm in the music scene, that's got to tell you something,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
stuff." But he was also in a band in Jakarta, which was where he was from. No, it's not true. It was in Jakarta. Where was he? He was here in Beijing, actually. He worked at ISB before he went to ISKL. And so we decided to start a band together. And I had written a few songs with Tailor-Made Suits, but we were just a cover band, and I wasn't confident enough. So when we started this band, we were all at one of those first little back-to-school nights where all the teachers are there getting to know each other, and we found like 9 or 10 musicians. And so we all have these big fantasies, as you do in those nights, where it's like, let's all start a band,
Yeah.
right? And so we put an email out to like 10 or 12 people saying, all right, we got a jam studio reserved for Monday at 6 o'clock. If you want to come, come. Nobody was in the band. It was just up for fun. 5 dudes showed up. A lead guitarist, a rhythm guitarist, 2 singers, a drummer, and a bass player.
This is the story. This is how legends start.
Yeah, it's the legends. And so we had 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then the next Monday, we sent the same email out to the same 20 people, like the same group or whatever, and the same 5 dudes showed up.
Uh-huh.
And so we looked around and we're like,
We're a band.
this is the band. Like, this is our band. And so they're like, well, what songs do we want to play? And I'm like, well, I would, we did a lot of grungy stuff. And I'm like, but I would love to do this song if we could. And this is the next song on deck.
All right, introduce the song for us, Steve.
Was a song called "Rapper's Delight."
Might come as a surprise, yeah, indeed, yeah.
And one of the reasons why I chose it as well is because it's epic in length. I don't even know if we'll be able to play the whole thing on the podcast if there's any time constraints.
None at all.
Because it's 15 minutes. It's incredible. And I'm figuring if I'm on the island and I get to pick one song, I'll pick a 15-minute one.
On a loop.
Yeah, just keep it going. That'll really kill an hour if I listen to 4 songs.
Of which you have many.
Exactly. And our drummer at the time, he knew the words to the first verse. And I would freestyle and make up words to the rest of it.
Those are the sort of people who are normally very quiet, but they're really, really popular because they know the first verse to a song that no one else knows. Right?
Exactly, which is this one.
They're sort of epic, legendary individuals. All right, let's listen to Rappers Tonight by Sugar Hill Gang.
Let's do it.
I said the hip hop, the hip it to the hip hop. You don't stop the rockin' to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test. I'm rapping to the beat, and me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello. Up to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, the purple, and yellow. But first, I gotta bang, bang, the boogie to the boogie. Say up, jump the boogie to the bang, bang, boogie. Let's rock. You don't stop, rock the rhythm that'll make your body rock. Well, so far you've heard my voice, but I brought 2 friends along. And next on the mic is my man Hank. Come on, Hank, sing that song.
Check it out, I'm the CASN, the OVA, and the rest is FLY. You see, I go by the code of the doctor of the mix, and these reasons I'll tell you why. You see, I'm 6'1", and I'm tons of fun, and I dress to a T. You see, I got more clothes than Muhammad Ali, and I dress so viciously. I got bodyguards, I got 2 big cars, that definitely ain't the whack. I got a Lincoln Continental and a sunroof Cadillac. So after school, I take a dip in the pool, which is really on the wall. I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. Him and talking my checkbook, credit cards more money than a sucker could ever spend. But I wouldn't give a sucker or a punk from the rock and not a dime till I made it again. Everybody go, hotel, motel, what you gonna do today? Is I'm gonna get a fly girl, gonna get some spring and drive off in a death OJ. Everybody go, hotel, motel, holiday inn. You see, if your girl starts acting up, then you take her friend. I'm Master G, my mellow is on you, so what you gonna do?
Well, it's on and on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I said a M-A-S, a T-E-R, a G with a double E. I said I go by the unforgettable name of the man they call a Master G. Well, my name is known all over the world by all the foxy ladies and the pretty girls. I'm going down in history as the baddest rapper that ever could be. Now I'm feeling the highs and you're feeling the lows. The beat starts getting into your toe. You start popping your fingers and stomping your feet and moving your body while you're sitting in your seat. And then damn, you start doing the freak. I said bam, right out of your seat. Then you throw your hands high in the air. You rock it to the rhythm, shake your dairy air. You rock it to the beat without a care. Cruise the short shot MCs for the affair. Now I'm not as tall as the rest of the gang, but I rap to the beat just the same. I got a little face and a pair of rhyme eyes. All I'm here to do, ladies, is hypnotize. Sing it on and on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I sing it on and on and on and on and on like a hot butter. The pop, the pop, the pop, give it, pop, the pop, pop. You don't dare stop or come alive, y'all. Give me what you got. I guess by now you can take a hunch and find that I am the baby of the bunch, but that's okay. I still keep in stride, cause all I'm here to do is just a wiggle your behind. Sing it on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I sing it on and on and on and on and on. Rock, y'all. Throw it on the floor. I'm gonna freak you here, I'm gonna freak you there. I'm gonna move you out of this atmosphere, cause I'm one of a kind and I'll shock your mind. I put the jiggles in your behind. I say the 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, girls, get on the floor. Come alive, y'all. Give me what you got, cause I'm guaranteed to make you rock. I said 1, 2, 3, 4. Tell me Wonder Mike, what are you waiting for? To the hip hop, the hippie to the hippie, the hip hip, the hopper, you don't stop, rock it to the bang bang, the boogie say up, jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie beat. Well, skittle bebop, we rock a Scooby Doo. Well, guess what? America, we love you, cause you rock and a roll with us so much so you can rock till you're 101 years old. I don't mean to brag, I don't mean to boast, but we like hot butter on a breakfast toast. Rock it out, a baby bubba to the boogie, then bang bang, the boogie to the beat. Beat is so unique. Come on, everybody, and dance to the beat.
So that's Steve Northcott's third choice this evening, Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight, and we were in KL, and you were teaching at ISKL, and you
Correct.
were a member of the Benchmarks, which is your second band, right? There's 5 dudes
That's
who
right.
showed up, and did you in fact get through Rapper's Delight? Did you make it happen?
We did. We did what we often did, and we kind of turned it into a medley of other songs.
Yeah.
If there was a song that was too hard to play, perhaps like maybe the
Yeah.
bridge was too hard, we just eliminate it. If there was a song that had too many changes or too many words, we just cut 2 verses out and what have you. We were pretty good at that.
So of course, if you're a non-musician like me, the only way you know the term "the bridge" is from James Brown.
Take it to the
Going
bridge.
back to the beginning. So you had some happy years in KL, but you also took a time out, right? Because at some stage in your life, I think I'm getting it right, you've been a stand-up comedian, you've been a documentary maker, clearly a convict. We'll
Clearly.
move on.
I dressed up for you today.
Thanks very
Look how
much.
nice I look.
Well, no comment. So talk about that time out you took, if that's okay, if you're willing to do so.
Yeah.
You were in Malaysia at the time?
I was in Malaysia at the time. Time out's a good way. I had no idea what I was going to do after this little break I took from teaching, if you will. At the time, it could have been permanent. I didn't really know. I just knew I was at a point in my life where I knew that everything was building up to that, right? Like tailor-made suits, the benchmarks, just finally doing what I knew I should have been doing younger in my life. And then, so now I'm at the point where I'm still on the happy side of 30, but just got married at this
What do you
point.
mean, but just got married.
I just got married at this point.
You said, but just got married, I think.
But I just got
You need to edit that out.
You don't need to read anything into that. Amazingly, I just got married.
And
Fortunately,
yeah.
like my mother would say, fortunately, I just got married.
Did you hear that,
and so
Patricia?
I was starting to see that if there was an opportunity for me to just have a little fun and do kind of what I've always wanted to do, and that was the time. So I did 5 years
That's very brave.
at ISKL. It was good, and I had the full support from Hannah.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had done comedy for about 2 years.
All right, so we need to unpack that a wee bit, the comedy, because that's probably the most courageous thing an individual can do.
It's
stand up on stage cold and try and make people laugh. And when it happens, it's great, I'd imagine. But goodness me, tell us about that.
it's a drug for sure in terms of what it does to you. The first time I ever performed comedy in Canada, I'd started in Singapore actually, just essentially doing comedy before bands. And there was one time there was a heavy metal band playing, and I did comedy before them. People playing darts, and like it was the nightmare, right? But every comedian has these stories. So I wanted to do one in Canada to make it feel real. And so I got 7 minutes, which is an eternity if you're a young comic or a beginner. I got 7 minutes at a Pro-Am at Absolute Comedy in Ottawa.
Right.
And, I was going in with a bunch of confidence because in Singapore, when I would do comedy, at the time, I'd get 30, 40 friends out, come and they'd be supportive. And even if there were goths in the back shooting darts in Singapore, I would still have a pretty good community. Yeah. So when I did my first show in Ottawa, 200 people, maybe 250 people, in a sit-down proper comedy club. The brick wall, the stage is half the size of that desk you're sitting on. Like we're talking a diameter of maybe 1 meter. Yeah. That's the stage, and because it's just you and a microphone. And before, I was sitting in the side chair before I went on, and my head was under the table, and I was just spitting. Just my stomach was in knots, and I'd never had that feeling before.
Who are your inspirations?
For comedy?
Yeah.
For me, the big ones are comedians that came from the school of Bill Hicks, George Carlin, going back to almost a heavy metal thing too.
Usually offensive, and essentially.
I don't find them offensive at all, really, in terms of
There are some that do, but
challenging, maybe, right? Like when I heard George Carlin and Bill Hicks, and they were saying things that I've never heard anybody say before, you know, and definitely different than anything I had ever heard anybody tout as this is the truth or what have you. Yeah. And you know, these are not just, you know, your basic poo-poo jokes.
Do you remember your first joke? Can you tell it?
I don't, to be honest. I don't. It's an excellent question. I know I have my first show ever filmed.
Do you?
But I don't recall.
Well, respect, because there is nothing, I think, that requires more courage.
Yeah, so when I got to Malaysia, and Time Out Magazine sort of started a comedy night, and I saw it in a magazine, and I just went, and I approached them, and I'm like, you know, can I get on stage? And from there on in, there was a group of maybe 5 local comedians and me, who were essentially the ones who were the ones who kept it going. Yeah. And every once in a while, a new comic would try. You know, there was like 5 or 6 of us who were the ones. So over the course of 7 years, you know, I monthly, I did shows in Singapore and Hong Kong, tons in Malaysia, and had mostly excellent. And I've had probably two shows that every comedian has where you would use the word bomb to describe, for sure. But nothing.
You have to, then, don't you? Really?
You have to, for sure.
Like teaching a class or something.
Jerry Seinfeld has a great thing, a great line where he says, you know, why is it so hard to be comfortable? And it's absolutely true. You know, but the day leading up to the shows, whenever I would perform, that day was always, you know, anxiety is the wrong word, but you're constantly trying to anticipate the variables that make or break a show. Your flow, your wording, your cadence, the audience who's there that night. What are they? Are they young? Are they drunk? Are they not? Are they foreigners? Are they locals? And Middle Asia was predominantly locals. And you know, I'm doing politics jokes. I'm doing local religion jokes. I'm doing.
Does it stay with you? I mean, when you look at, you know, the sort of rich source of potential source of comedy now that's presented in the news. Sure. Perhaps by certain leaders of certain countries. Does it sort of come to you as you sit there?
I still think, see, back when I was doing the comedy and On the Beaten Path and those things, one of the reasons why it was very grueling was it takes a toll on you mentally because you're always thinking about it. Yeah. You can't, if you're doing creative tasks, you can't not be working on it. So if you think of something, you got to write it down. If you don't write it down, it's gone. Right? And so while I was a comedian and while I was doing On the Beaten Path, I don't think I got a restful night's sleep in 2.5 years. And then I had a baby, and then it just never since kind of thing.
Documentary making as well fascinates us, or certainly fascinates me. What were the sort of themes?
It's a music-based travel series. Right. So the idea of your basic Nat Geo Discovery Channel travel show, but this one was entirely focused on music. Right. So we would go to places like India, Myanmar, Vietnam, and kind of look for local musicians and get an idea of what they play, how they got started. We'd record music with them. We would see them perform. We went to a very local first music festival in Cambodia since the Khmer Rouge were killing people for performing Western music. It was in a tiny little village in Kampot. I had the chance to go and revisit that place recently, which was amazing. I filmed and spent time with the House of Hip Hop in Vietnam. I recorded a 17-minute improvised jam with a sitar player on the beach in Goa. And we luckily had our camera going.
Say that, really.
No, there's not. And everywhere we went.
I mean, if you use that line in an interview,
17-minute improvised jam with a sitar player in the beaches of Goa. Yeah. No, it was absolutely magical. I'll send you the link to it before. Anybody can go to onthebeat.com and onthebeatenpath.com and see these things. But it changed me. Those 2 years changed me so radically because the amount of generosity I received on those two, and we're talking about artists who shared their time, artists who shared their recording studios. We got tons of gifts from people who ran hotels and let us stay at their place, people who offered their expertise on how to make films. It totally changed my view on what it meant to be an artist and what it meant to give things away.
Yeah, good for you. Well done. I mean, taking that time out with Hannah's support is brave and obviously bore a lot of fruit.
And I still do it. Like it's a gift that I'm still playing with.
Yeah, good for you. It's full of admiration for people who take a step like that. Well done. So you came to Beijing happily for all of us.
I did, yeah.
I understand that the first year from conversations we've had before was quite challenging.
From the blue sunny skies of Kuala Lumpur to the grey smog here. That was 6 years ago. Obviously, it's different now. Yeah. 6 years ago was very challenging,
Yeah.
and with a baby, 6-month-old baby. And,
Yeah.
it was tough.
And so you're still here, which is great for all of us, and you're playing music, and you obviously people who are listening to this know much more about this than I do. But I mean, you're regular in bars, and is it like a one established band, or do you jump around and play on your own, or how does it go for you here in your music?
In terms of my music playing?
Yeah, in terms of your participation.
When I first started, I was essentially a musician for hire in the bands that already existed. I played harmonica in one band and bass in another band and that kind of thing. But now it's the consistent threesome of myself, Travis Tebow, and Brad Filan. We go by the moniker of Dirty City.
Yeah.
And so it's the most unique band I've ever played in because Brad plays African djembe, right? So he's got 2 hand drums. Travis plays sax,
Yeah.
right? So he just wails on that thing. It's like I have my own Clarence in the band, right? And he just goes off on it. And so I'm the rhythm guitar and singing. It's a 3-piece, so we can play anywhere.
Yeah.
And we just tend to take songs that people know, and you have to make a different version of it because of what we play.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's no djembe, sax,
What's your
acoustic guitar.
showstopper?
I'm sorry?
What's your showstopper? What's your...
Well, if you ask us, that's probably different than us versus the fans. We do this rap medley of 80s rap songs, including Rapper's Delight, but we do it over this kind of different jazz funky style, and there's like 9 different rap songs that we sing. It's like 7 minutes long. It's very self-indulgent, but we love it.
Yeah, of course.
When we play, one of our favorite places to play is the Irish Volunteer down in Lido. Right. They like the 99 Red Balloons, maybe.
Really?
They just like the pub ragers, the pub anthems that they can sing along. We got 3 or 4 original songs as well that we
played
do.
Elvis Costello song, don't you? That's one of the reasons why we first started talking about music.
I played an Elvis Costello song when I played with Breen's band.
Right.
With Breen's band.
Right.
We did
Is he an influence of yours?
Elvis Costello or Breen? Both.
We all know the answer to the latter.
Elvis Costello I like for a lot of the same reasons that I would like Tom Waits, right? Like he's just his own artist, you know, and he's just he's weird in the right perfect way.
Yes.
You know, and he's not, you know, in your face, and he's just kind of who he is and does what he does. So I respect that.
One of my favourites, and if anyone is ever kind enough to offer to have me as a guest on this show.
We got that. Mom, you hear that?
His name would feature, that's for sure. All right, so it's that time, I'm afraid. I'm going to ask you to play your last song,
All right.
which I think is one of yours from your own band. Is that right?
Yeah, so this song was one of the last songs we ever made and recorded with On the Beaten Path. It was definitely the last full-length documentary that we made, where we went to this jungle in Cambodia, and for a week, for 5 days, I invited 3 artists, a rapper, an R&B singer, and the only way this guy could be described as like the Malaysian Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
He played punk rock mandolin. His name is Asmal Yunar, and he's phenomenal. And I knew them all by reputation, but I didn't know any of them more than that. I'd seen them perform and that sort of thing. So I just reached out to them and I said, listen, if I can fly you guys to Cambodia and put you up, would you guys be interested in making this movie with me where every day for 5 days we're going to write a new song, and then at night we're going to go record it in the studio? I go, it's going to be pretty intense, but I think it'll be a ton of fun. And they all agreed. And so this song was, I think it was the 3rd song we recorded, 2nd or 3rd song we recorded. And it has verses by all of us. And this is one of the songs I'm most proud of on our On the Beaten Path journey, for sure.
Well, let's listen to it. We're on every day.
Every day, featuring Nadira, Vandal, Asmal Yunar, and of course Gary and I from On the Beaten Path.
Steve Northcott.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coming together and making new sounds, a beautiful face of creativity, a few tastes that true mobility. What's next to capture the bomb? The banks of the Mekong making new songs. Construction of a new phase. 5 tracks in 5 days. Sidetracked, the views displayed. A new age truth on a page. Few ways to translate the planned state. On a blank slate, the land's made to make smiles that last. Along the path of miles that pass. Waves that crash when boats go by. Sitting on the dock, now I know why.
Every day we're going somewhere. Every day we're heading someplace that we've never been before. As I enter this new phase, every day we're going somewhere. Every day we're heading someplace that we've never been before. As I'm meeting new faces.
Find a city, a town, a port, a home. Most places you were never really alone. Companies all around you when you wake, you dream. And faces and places you never seen, never been. Find a city, a town, a port, a home. Most places you were never really alone. Companies all around you when you wake, you dream. And faces and places you never seen, never been.
Every day we're going somewhere. Every day we're heading someplace that we've never been before. As I enter this new phase, every day we're going somewhere. Every day we're heading someplace that we've never been before. As I'm meeting new faces.
Yesterday I was bit around, a little confused about my time, wasting the life I had used for someone else's dollars and someone else's dreams. It appeared to me I had no clue what it all means for me to be what I always saw in my dreams. It's not make-believe, it's what I aim to achieve today for a little bit of better tomorrow. Learn from the best and run through the front door.
Every day we're going somewhere. Every day we're heading someplace that we've never been before. As I enter this new phase, every day we're going somewhere. Every day we're heading someplace that we've never been before. As I'm meeting new faces.
So that brings us pretty much up to date. You're in Beijing with family man, as I said, Renaissance man, former financier, art teacher, comedian, filmmaker, musician, and ISB now for 6 years. Is that right, Steve?
That's right, 6 years.
Good. Okay, so we're going to get to the point where I encourage you, please, to share with us the book that you would take with you on the desert island.
All right, so that was, I almost struggled with that one more than I struggled with the music. That would be where you insert the joke. That's because you don't read books. That would be a
Would
good
I do
one.
that?
You
Would I
would.
do that?
You might.
In fact, he asked me to borrow a book.
Right. So obviously, you know, I wanted it to be. I knew I wanted to bring an autobiography. I wanted it to be a story about somebody. I connect with those more, but I also felt like I could have. It would feel like that person was with me, if you will. And I picked a book about comedy, stand-up comedy. So I picked Steve Martin's Born Standing Up.
Yeah.
And it's not because Steve Martin was like a radical influence on me at all.
Well, his stuff about the French language is legendary.
Phenomenal.
If
I did enjoy him.
Now I would say it.
You would go. We'll dub it in. This is where you put that in, Aaron, when you edit it. But I almost along the same long lines of what we're talking about with James Brown and these artists. He was a comedian, yes, but he was also just a radical entertainer.
Yeah.
And when he started as a comedian in Los Angeles, there weren't stand-up clubs in the traditional way that there was in the 80s and 90s and what have you. Essentially, they were like almost like magic halls, right? They were places where people at the lowest rung of the entertainment industry would go to perform, whether it be magicians, comedians, what have you. And you could be in a room on any God-given night with a banjo player, a comedian, and a magician, and that would be kind of the setup. And he would paint these stories of what it was like as he played banjo back then, like he does now. He's a Grammy Award-winning banjo player now.
Absolutely
right. But back then it was just kind of part of his act, and he would do almost Andy Kaufman-like stunts, with what. And so as I was reading his book, when I was starting to be a comedian, you learn this not just about telling jokes, right? It's everything, like how you stand and how you deliver, and people's perception of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right, you got to take them on. You got to take them on a bit of a ride, and it's not just with your words.
And how powerful the silence is as well.
Exactly, and when he paints these pictures of these purple velvet lined rooms, and people sitting in sort of like throne like chairs all throughout, and they're there because they're waiting for the goth musician to, bring a dove back to life, and he had to play a banjo medley. And eat pies or whatever, right?
Eat doves.
What's that?
Eat doves.
Eat doves. And so those sort of lessons and those sort of stories and a time and place, I also thought it would be a good anecdote to talk about the comedy, here on the podcast, which is why I chose it, because really,
he got pummeled, didn't he? I mean, I've read that book as well, and I'm a big fan of his, and there was that golden era when he was in TV, obviously before then, when he was lesser known, and then in TV, then into the movies, and then it went wrong for him. He made that movie LA Dreams, which I think really, hammered him.
Right.
And I felt badly for him because he was always a favourite of mine.
And, for sure.
And then he re-emerged, great success, not least because of the banjo playing, and he really is a maestro on the banjo. It's,
yeah, really good. And I almost have a hard time blaming the comedians when things like that happen, right?
Yeah.
Like the world of Hollywood, how it swirls around you, and all of a sudden you're on this upward trajectory, of popularity, of money, and then you got people telling you what you should and shouldn't do, and then all of a sudden you don't want to do it, but like, here's a check,
I felt terrible for him.
for those kinds of things. So
I think Louis C.K. has a different story, trajectory, in terms of owning his demise.
For sure.
That's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. I'm not entirely comfortable anymore.
No, well, I'm rather disappointed you were in the first place. But you're going to be cast away forever to a desert island. So that's your book, Born Standing Up by Steve Martin.
That's my book, yeah.
I was pleased to see that on the list because it's one of my favourites as well. And your luxury item, it probably won't come as a surprise, but go ahead and tell us
I
about
didn't try to be too deep with that one. It would be an acoustic guitar. It just passes the time.
Any
But of course, when you think, what happens when a string breaks?
Yeah.
Right? What are you going to do? But of course, we're talking about a fantasy situation here.
You might be able to find an intestine or two.
No, there you go. There you go. I'll find something.
Just to be optimistic.
A little string from a
One
coconut.
that belongs to Brian McManus or whatever.
Well, then I'll write the song about him. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. No, it had to be a guitar for sure.
Brian McManus's last. Okay. All right, great. So listen, Steve, it's been a pleasure. But you do know, of course, I'm going to put you on the spot and say only one song on the desert island.
That'll be easy for me. Just the other day on Facebook, one of the artists who recorded Every Day with me, how they have those Facebook memories. 8 years ago you did this, 7 years ago you did this, or whatever. So apparently 6 years ago we made Every Day.
Yeah.
That was when it went down, and he had shared it.
Yeah.
And then, within the day, all the artists who were on that project with me, they're all commenting on it and sharing and that sort of thing. And so I would pick that song easily just because of the connections and the stories and the time in my life that was and how rich it was for me. So I would take.
Very
I would take
surprised
everything.
if it wasn't that one, bearing in mind the fact that you created it.
Yeah, for sure.
Very rich.
And I don't mean for it to sound indulgent. Like I picked that one because I wrote that one or I performed on that one.
No, I think everyone would
it's just
understand.
because of the memories that it brings back.
Well, listen, if I'd written a song, I would have probably taken that one myself as well.
Okay.
So credit, respect to you, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure. You are from this point on cast away. Good luck. How do you think you do on your own?
I think I'll do great. Do I have to come to work tomorrow? Oh my God. Am I good? Am I good for a day just to get settled into my beachside surroundings?
We'll talk about that.
Castaway surroundings. Well, it's almost like a castaway in my art room. I'm a little out of the way from people, so I feel good about it. Yeah, I feel good about it. Thank you.
You'd make it. Listen, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
One of the pleasures of doing this is that anybody who does bother to listen gets to know a little bit more about the fabulous people that we work alongside, and You've got a rich history, a rich present, and it's been a real pleasure getting to know you a little bit better and talking about some of the most important aspects of your life. So, Steve, it's a shame to cast you away to the desert island, but I have to, and I wish you well. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Patrick.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
You're listening to DJ Teach on Futures